Hey there everybody, and welcome to my review of the Hyundai Tucson. Now before I start the review, of course the health and safety warning is in effect as the sun is still shining and I am yet again wearing shorts. But back to the Hyundai Tucson. So the Tucson is Hyundai's mid-sized SUV and sits between the smaller Kona and the larger 7-seater Santa Fe. It actually replaces the old iX35, which in turn replaced the original Tucson. So things have kind of come full circle in that effect. Now underneath the Tucson it does share a lot of its components with the Kia Sportage, and like the Sportage for 2019, the Tucson has had a midlife update. So I've had the Tucson to review to see if those updates are enough to consider the Tucson in this highly competitive segment. Style-wise, well, I actually think this is a bit of a strength for the Tucson. It's a very handsome car to look at and actually looks quite European at the same time. Now granted, it's not as striking as something like a Peugeot 3008, but in this premium SE trim, which is the top of the range trim level, you do get a nice amount of chrome at the front. You've got full LED headlights and taillights and those very attractive 19-inch alloy wheels. And now if you want your Tucson to have more of a sporty edge to it, you can order an N-line trim level, which gives you all the sporty paraphernalia but none of the performance car living costs. But let me know what you think is the best looking car in this segment. Is it the Hyundai Tucson, the Kia Sportage, the Peugeot 3008 or the Volkswagen Tiguan? So click up in the top right hand corner and vote now. But all in all, I actually think it's a very attractive car, and it goes to show because there's loads of Tucsons driving about here in the UK. But that's enough of the outside, let's have a little look at the inside. So once sat in the front of the Hyundai Tucson, you do find it's a really nice, comfortable place to sit. Firstly, because of the high seating position, getting in and out of the car is really easy. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, this is definitely one car to consider. And then once sat in the driver's seat, you do find that there's plenty of adjustment, particularly on this premium SE trim level, because the driver's seat and front passenger seat both come with electric adjustment. However, the front passenger seat doesn't come with lumbar support. You can also get the perfect driving position because the steering has both rake and reach adjustment to it, so that is an added bonus. Interior quality is also very good as well. We've got soft touch plastics here on top of the dash. We've also got some faux leatherette on the centre section here with some stitching for a more premium feel. However, from there downwards it is all hard plastics. But then again, a lot of cars in this segment have the same levels of quality. You've also got some soft touch plastics here on top of the door and some leatherette on the door handle. Cubby spaces are actually pretty good as well. We've got some decent sized door bins with actually like an allocated spot to put a bottle of drink in. However, it's not lined with fabric, so if you do chuck any loose items in there, they will rattle around all over the place. We've got a couple of cup holders here just behind the gear lever, so just be wary if you have got a tall bottle of drink in there, because you might end up knocking it whilst you're changing gear. We've also got the armrest, which has got a nice bit of adjustment to it, and then underneath there's a bit of useful cubby space for it as well. There is a little rectangular spot here which you could put your key in, and also in front of the gear lever we've got some space here for your mobile phone if it's got wireless charging. We've also got a USB input as well as an auxiliary input and two 12-volt sockets. So if I could ask for the next generation of Tucson Hyundai, could we get rid of one of the 12-volt sockets and replace it with a second USB? Just, you know, for a little bit of added convenience. And then we've got the glove box, which is of an okay size, but the manual for the Tucson, as you can see there, that's thicker than I think the Oxford English Dictionary. So with that in there, it will take up quite a bit of room, so it's not the most useful. However, other than that, it's actually not too bad. I do actually like the layout here in the Tucson. It's much better than the pre-facelift version. And on this premium SE, there's just buttons everywhere, but they are where you would expect them. So the infotainment system, which is an 8-inch touchscreen, is set high up on the dashboard with physical shortcut buttons on the outer edges. So it is better than that of the Skoda Karoq, which actually has them flush to the screen and then not physical buttons. Then we got all your air conditioning controls set just below the air vents, and they're all nicely laid out. And again, being the premium SE, we have both heated and ventilated seats. And in this weather, oh, that's a blessing. And then we've just got some additional buttons here. So we have got an electric handbrake with auto hold, 360 cameras. We've also got hill descent control, a drive mode, and also front and rear parking sensors. And then just underneath the right hand vent on the driver's side, we've got a couple of buttons there to help with the driver aids. there's just plenty of kit in this premium SE trim level. The only things that's actually missing is probably actual park assist, where the car will park itself, but the fact they've got 360 cameras and front and rear sensors, you should be able to park this with a lot of ease. But other than that, it's actually a very nice, comfortable place to be, and I really am liking sitting in the front of the Tucson. But you know what, that's enough of the front, let's have a sit in the back. Sat in the back of the Tucson, you actually find it's not too bad back here. So that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room, and headroom is not too bad. I'm not actually touching the roof lining. Yes, I have had to move the blind across for the sunroof because the sun is quite powerful today. So if you are 6 foot tall, you might find yourself having your head rubbing against the roof lining. However, there is a solution to that, and it does make for a much more relaxing journey. If you pull the little handle on the side of the seat, you can recline the seats really far back, which means if you want to fall asleep on a long journey, you can do so and you'll actually be very comfortable. This is a very spacious car to sit in the back of, especially if you are a bit taller. What I also like is that there are some decent cubby spaces as well. We've got decent sized door bins, again with a little recess, so you can put a bottle of drink in. We've also got some airplane style pockets on the backs of the seats, and we also have an armrest with a couple of cup holders. However, there is no ski chute for loading longer items through the boot. You also get a couple of air vents, and underneath there you think you're going to get a 12-volt socket, but it's actually a USB charging input. So I am very much impressed with that, and I hope for the next generation of Tucson they might put an extra one in there, because that would definitely be an added bonus. And again, being the premium SE, you actually get heated rear seats, and they are controlled by a button here in the back next to the door handle. Also, the windows go all the way down, so if you want to rest your arm on the side, you can do so. If I had any complaints, it would probably be that the windows themselves are on a little bit of the small side. So if you have got any children that are sat in ISOFIX seats, of which you've got support on the outer seats, and they're not what appears to be the VW Group kind of clips which have a cover on them, they're actually hinged, which means it's very easy to put a child seat in, so that's something to be aware of. But if they are sat very low, you might find that these windows are a little bit on the small side. But other than that, this is actually a very comfortable place to sit. You can definitely get 4 adults in here with ease. So that's enough of the rear, let's have a look at the boot. So once the boot is opened, you are presented with 513 litres of space, which is very close to the class best, just beaten by the likes of the Skoda Karoq and Peugeot 3008. However, it does depend on what engine you go for. You see, if you stick with the petrol engines, which there are 2 1.6s, a non-turbo and a turbocharged, just avoid the non-turbo and stick with the turbo, which is what I've got here, you get the full 513 litres. If, however, you decide to go for one of the diesels, especially the 2-litre mild hybrid diesel, that actually drops to 459 litres, because Hyundai needs somewhere to put the mild hybrid battery unit, and also the AdBlue for the diesel unit, and they will go underneath the boot floor, so therefore it drops to that 459 litres. But it's actually a very usable boot space, particularly with this petrol version. You actually have a variable boot floor, and I've got it here in its lowest setting, so you've got a tiny little load lip, but the tonneau cover actually has 4 places for you to put it. You see, if you have it in its farthest setting or normal configuration, you can't recline those rear seats to as far back as you would like. So Hyundai have made a space so you can do that. You can also have it set on the boot floor just here, but if you are loading any large heavy items, it does mean that it is going to catch and get in the way. So you can actually put it underneath the boot floor. Again, a nice place to put it, so you don't have to leave it at home in the garage. Hyundai have really thought about this, because you also get a 12-volt socket, you get a couple of little shopping hooks, one on the back of the rear seat, and even the tethering hooks themselves are actually flush against the bodywork, so if you put some netting in, they're not going to catch on anything. So Hyundai have really thought about this. And if you put the seats flat, you almost have a completely flat loads bay, but it's actually very usable. It's a nice square load area. I'm very impressed so far with the Tucson, considering it has been out a little longer than some of its rivals. But that's enough of the practicality. Let's go for a drive. Now Now, before we set off for the driving part of the review in the Tucson, I thought I'd just take a moment to go through the engine choices available, because there are a couple to choose from. So petrol wise, we've got two 1.6 litre units to choose from, one without a turbo and one with a turbo. Now, the one without a turbo's got 129 brake horsepower, and you know what, I would just simply avoid it. Just go straight for the turbocharged version, because that way you've got 175 brake horsepower and you can have it mated to either a 6-speed manual, which is what I got here, or a dual clutch transmission. Now, both of those engines are front wheel drive only. Now, you can go for two diesels. There's two 1.6 litre units. Again, these are both turbocharged, but one has 115 brake horsepower and the other has 134 brake horsepower. And you know what, I would go for the more powerful version again, because you do get those gearbox choices. And again, those two engines are front wheel drive only. And then finally, we've got a 2 litre unit, which has actually got mild hybrid technology, and that is a dual clutch transmission only, but that also comes with 4-wheel drive. So if you do plan on doing any kind of off-roading in your Tucson, that will be the engine to go for. Unless you go for the other ones, in which case, yes, you can do a little bit of soft roading, but that'll be about it. And if you go for the Premium SC or the N-Line, you definitely don't want to go off-road and curb those lovely alloys. So once you get driving in the Hyundai Tucson, first impressions are actually pretty good. It feels very easy to drive and actually pretty comfortable. Now, visibility is a little bit of a weak point with the Tucson, because you've got these very thick A-pillars at the front, which can make it difficult to see round junctions. And when you're looking over your shoulder, the C-pillar, despite it having a window in there, is actually quite thick, so there is a prominent blind spot. However, on this Premium SC, I have got blind spot monitoring, so that does cover that little aspect. But first impressions are actually very good, and the spec level in this car is absolutely brilliant. Granted, yes, I have got the top of the range Premium SC, but the only thing I am missing in here, I think, is the kitchen sink. So there are 5 trim levels in the Tucson range to choose from. You've got the entry-level S Connect, SE Nav, the latest edition, the sporty looking N-Line, Premium and Premium SE, which is what I've got here. And you've got pretty much everything you could possibly want and imagine. Now, the real highlights I've experienced with the Tucson Premium SE over this weekend have been the ventilated seats and the air conditioning. They've been a real highlight. They've definitely kept my berry bum cool, and the air conditioning themselves actually is really good. There's huge vents underneath the infotainment system, and it's really helped in keeping me cool whilst driving in this very warm weather. I'd love to see what a Tucson is like in keeping me warm during winter. It's just got everything you could possibly imagine, and if I'm being honest, the only things I've noticed that it's missing is a park assist, where the car will park itself. But to be honest, the fact that you've got front and rear parking sensors and those 360 cameras actually means you could easily do it yourself. And the other thing I have noticed it is missing is actually adaptive cruise control. I thought I was going to get that with this car, but I've got regular cruise control or a speed limiter. But the only way you can get adaptive cruise control is if you go for the dual clutch transmission. The reason being is it also comes with traffic stop and go, so that means that you can actually have a very relaxing drive, as this car will stop and move itself forward in traffic. So I am a little bit disappointed I haven't got a standard adaptive cruise control, but you know what, it's a minor setback, and if I was doing those kind of motorway miles, I definitely would go for a dual clutch transmission anyway. So what's the ride and handling like in the Tucson? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it does feel like a nice easy car to drive and is pretty comfortable. However, if you are driving at slow speed over a bumpy road surface, the Tucson can become unsettled quite quickly and just not have the same kind of composure as a Volkswagen Tiguan. And when you are driving at motorway speeds, my main criticism is actually there's quite a bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin. Now, that might be because the Premium SE comes with those 19-inch alloy wheels. However, I have driven a Skoda Karoq Sportline, and that too comes with 19-inch alloy wheels, and just felt a little bit quieter at speed. However, I would probably recommend looking at one of the lower trim levels for some slightly smaller alloy wheels, and that way you'll probably have a more comfortable ride and less road noise intruding into the cabin. But it is a minor niggle all in all. I do like the steering in the Tucson. It's actually got quite a bit of weight to it, definitely more so than the Skoda Karoq and the Peugeot 3008, but don't take that as my way of saying it's sporty. It's definitely not. If you are after a sporty mid-sized SUV, then I definitely recommend the Seat Ateca, as that's just got more feedback through the wheel. But what it means is at slow speeds you do know what the wheels are doing, but as you get faster and faster you do lose a little bit of that communication. So you can throw the car into some corners, but you probably won't have as much confidence doing so than you would do in the Seat Ateca, which I've already mentioned. But it is a nice feel to it, and I do actually like the steering wheel as well. It's got a nice amount of padding and just feels really nice in your hand, and it actually has a relatively good amount of leather around it. So with my time in the Tucson, there have been a number of features I've really loved about this car. So firstly, behind the sun visor, we've got an absolutely huge vanity mirror, and I've almost got lost looking into it at my glorious beard. It really is that big. Also, the infotainment system I just think is actually really good. It's surprisingly quick, especially against some of the class best, and I do like the graphics and how clear it is to use. It's just actually a very good system compared to some of the rivals in this segment. Also, and I know I've already mentioned it, is that boot opening mechanism when you stand next to it with the key in your pocket. I just think that's a brilliant idea, especially if you don't want to feel like a little bit of a prat having to wave your leg underneath the bumper. And the amount of times I have seen that being used, I could probably count on one hand. I think that's just a more user-friendly version of that system. But yeah, I've just really liked the Tucson. It's definitely grown on me as I've been driving the car. Yes, it's not the class best. I do think cars like the Skoda Karoq and the Peugeot 3008 still do incredibly well at the top of this segment. But you know what? This is definitely a car you've got to put on your shortlist if you are after a mid-sized SUV. Especially if you've got tall passengers who are going to sit in the back of the car, because those reclining seats are again a big highlight on the Tucson. Not many other cars in this class have got that feature, so it's definitely something to look for. I've just really enjoyed my time in this car, and yeah, it has actually grown on me. So what are my thoughts on the Hyundai Tucson? Well, that midlife facelift is definitely needed in order to make sure the Tucson was competitive against rivals. But I would definitely describe it as a jack of all trades. It does everything really well and isn't really a master of any particular area. It's just a very comfortable, very relaxing, very practical car with extremely good kit levels. Okay, that could be actually the standout feature for it. But the other thing I like as well is that if it comes down to pounds and pence, definitely visit your local dealership, because there are some amazing offers on the Tucson. And also that 5-year unlimited mileage warranty will definitely be very appealing if you're looking to keep your car for a few years or so. And that's kind of the big thing about Hyundai. They've got a lot of confidence in their car, and they do put an awful lot of kit in there. So the value for money is very good. But I am looking forward to the next generation Tucson, because Hyundai are clearly on the up. And I definitely want to drive the N-Line version, because I have been told by somebody at Hyundai that it does drive a lot different to this regular Tucson. So that's something to look forward to. But yeah, I definitely say that the Hyundai Tucson is a jack of all trades, just an all-round very good car, but just not quite at the top of the class. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Hyundai Tucson. As always, please hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notifications icon to let you know when I, the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions about the Tucson and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. And are you a Tucson owner? Have I missed anything out? Again, put them down in the comments section. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and I always recommend that you follow on there for additional content, including still images and live videos. But guys, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and yeah, I look forward to making the next video for you. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye. Now before you go, I will add one final thing, and that's the Krell sound system you get with this Premium SE. It's actually a really good sound system. I've never heard of the company before, but I have been thoroughly impressed by it. And as someone who likes to listen to his heavy metal, this is kind of one of the key things I look for in the car, and it's actually a very impressive sound system. So that's something to look for if you do like listening to your banging tunes. Now, if you'll excuse me,